I'm Lloyd Holiday, and this is the Cost of a Thing podcast. Thanks for listening in today. So what happened to that great standard of living that we used to enjoy here in America in the 1960s and even into the 1970s? Well, that's what the Cost of a Thing podcast is all about, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here. If you've listened to my podcasts before, you know that I believe that the 1960s and 70s had a better standard of living, at least for the average person. And I did my list of top 10 super ripoffs that I believe contributed the most to the reduction in standard of living from the 1960s and 70s to that of the standard of living we have in America here today for the average person. And there is the list of my top 10 super ripoffs right up on the screen there. And I have done an individual podcast on each one of those super ripoffs in more detail. If you want to watch those, go to my YouTube channel page, and there's a playlist there of all of those. Now, even with all those super ripoffs going on and the lower general standard of living in America here today, you can still do your best to have a great standard of living. And so you might say, well, how do you do that? It's not as easy as it used to be. In the old days, in the 60s and 70s, and in those years, a young guy would pop out of high school, able-bodied, and go down to the car factory and get a job. Great pay, great benefits, pension, all that. And pretty soon he could buy a little house and start a family, get married, start a family. The wife didn't even have to work. She didn't want to. He made enough money to support that. Well, those days are gone. But you can still do it. You have to work harder, and you have to be a little bit smarter. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I've come up with my top things to have a great standard of living here in 2020, in spite of those super ripoffs. A lot of those super ripoffs, the average guy can't do anything about. Try to go around them, try to avoid them. But there are things you can do. Take positive steps, be proactive, go for that great standard of living. Today I'm going to reveal my top 10 list of things I would do to have a better and even a great standard of living in the United States today. Okay, today I'm going to talk about what I think are the top 10 things that a person can do to have a great standard of living in the year 2020. Maybe you already know this stuff. Basically, I think common sense. Maybe your parents told you all this stuff, and your grandparents. If they did, they were trying to do you a good favor, and most of the time, mom and dad and your grandparents are going to tell you what's the right thing for you to do to have a good life, because they want you to have a good life. And so do I. So, okay, here's the first 5 on this first chart I put up here, the top 10 things for a great standard of living in 2020. And I'm just going to briefly go over these. I don't have time to go into each one into depth today. And of course, number 1, and I think it's the most important thing for a great standard of living, saving money. Save your money. I know everybody tells you to save your money. Your parents probably told you to save your money, grandparents, and they were right. It's going to be the number 1 thing that's going to lead you to have a great standard of living in this world, in this country, especially in the United States. You got to have a little money. And let me just say this about saving money. You do it for your freedom. You don't do it for the interest you're going to get on it. Now, that's great if you can get a little interest on your savings in the bank or wherever. But you do it for your freedom. Money in the bank equals your freedom. And there are a lot of freedom. If you have money in the bank, you have the freedom to quit a job that you don't like and then take some time to look for a better job that you want. You have the freedom to know where your next meal's coming from. So you don't have to go to the government and go on welfare or food stamps. You've got money to cover yourself. That's freedom. Freedom not having to go on the dole. You have the freedom to pay cash for a car or even a house if you've saved enough money. and not have to borrow money. The freedom to not borrow money, that's big. Maybe you want to start a business. You have the freedom to start a business if you have enough cash saved up. Go to work for yourself. Say you want to take a year off and go visit Europe or go travel around Europe. Maybe you've saved enough money. You can take a year off and go do that. So freedom to have your dreams, freedom to do what you want. You're not stuck as long as you have money in the bank. Save for your freedom. That's the number one in my top 10 list of things you can do to have a great standard of living in 2020. Okay, number 2 on the list there is develop your mental strength. There's other things that mental strength can be called. It can be called self-discipline, mental toughness, and there's ways to develop mental strength so that everything that comes along in life doesn't just knock you down. Have that self-discipline that's required. Do the other things on the list, like saving. That requires self-discipline. I'm not going to go into how to develop mental strength here today. There's lots of information on that all over the internet. I will say this, your best friend in this world is your mental strength. That's what's going to get you through when nothing else will. Okay, number 3 there, avoid bad habits and behaviors. That, again, requires mental strength. You see people all the time with bad habits and behaviors, and it's going to cost them. They're going to have a worse standard of living with those habits and behaviors. A couple of them I can think of: smoking, heavy drinking, drugs, crime, gambling, cheating on your wife, those kind of things. They are going to screw your life up, and you will not have a great standard of living. There's a lot more of them than that, but those are just some that I can. Okay, another one here is keep your health. If you don't have good health, you're not going to do anything in this world. Okay, you can't do much. You can't do any good for anybody else, and you can't hardly even take care of yourself if you don't have good health. And if you don't have good health, it costs you a lot of money. You got to spend a lot of money going to the doctor. You got to have procedures, and you got to take drugs and all this stuff. So you want to stay away from poor health. So my dad would always say, if you don't have your health, you've got nothing. And he was so right about that. He said that when I was a little kid, and it carried right through all my life. So I've tried to, got to eat healthy, got to do some exercise, and you got to stay away from those bad habits, such as smoking especially. Okay, number 5 there, don't waste your time. Now there's so many things to waste your time on. And I'm not saying you can't take a rest. You got to work 24 hours a day, but don't waste too much time. I did one on the Super Bowl the other day where 200 million man hours was spent watching the Super Bowl. Big waste of time in my opinion. Now, if that's what you did for the one thing for the week and relaxed and watched the game for 2 hours or so, that's okay. But people are continually watching games. They'll watch game after game after game. There's so many games on TV now, it would consume your whole life and everybody in your family's life to watch all those games. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of wasting time. And it's not just games on TV, it's TV in general, it's movies. If you waste too much time, you're not going to have a great standard of living because you have to work at building a great standard of living. Okay, there's the next chart, and I got the next 5 on there. Number 6, find affordable housing. You're not going to get ahead in life if you're paying too much for housing. And I think housing is the centerpiece of your standard of living. It's what makes a good standard of living or a bad standard of living. And to find that affordable housing, you might have to move. You might have to get out of these very expensive areas like San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, and so forth. And there's more now. It's spreading. What I call Californization is spreading across the country. And housing prices are 10, 15 times the average person's annual salary. And it used to be 2 to 3 times. Try to find 2 to 3 times. Find an area where it's 2 to 3 times and you can still make a decent salary. Rent shouldn't be more than 25% of your monthly income. Really, if you really want to get ahead, you want to find rent that's only 10% or less of your monthly income. And it can be done. And for a good standard of living, it has to be decent housing. You can't have a bunch of roommates, 6 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment or something like that. I've seen that. That's a bad standard of living as far as I'm concerned. Or it can't be in a bad neighborhood with a bunch of crime and murders and graffiti everywhere. It's got to be decent, a nice home in a nice neighborhood to have a good standard of living. Okay, number 7 there on the list, avoid toxic people and situations. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much, but I think all of us have known a toxic person or a toxic situation. You know that you've dealt with one because you feel it. You feel bad. You feel bad after that interaction, and you know it. And you can't always get away from these people. Some might be in your family, some might be at your job, but you can work toward getting away from them. There's plenty of ways to do that, and there's lots of stuff on the internet about avoiding toxic people and situations. But to have a great standard of living, you got to avoid them and hopefully get rid of them. Okay, number 8, stay out of debt. Debt is the opposite of savings. And the result is the opposite. If you have savings, you have freedom. If you have debt, you have slavery. It doesn't feel good to be a slave. It feels good to be free. The feeling of freedom creates a great standard of living. The feeling of slavery creates a poor standard of living. So you're not going to have as great of a standard of living if you have lots of debt or unnecessary debt. And you can't control your spending. See, that's part of, again, that self-discipline and that mental strength comes in there. Okay, number 9, always be working to improve your situation until you get to a very good situation. Now, there's certain, you don't have to be a millionaire living on the beach to have a great standard of living. You can just have a nice house in a decent neighborhood with nice neighbors, and that can be a great standard of living, and many people have that. And that's what you want to work toward. But you got to always be improving your situation till you get there. So just because you got a little apartment, and right now all you can afford is a couple of roommates, and you're living in one of these high cost of living areas on the coasts, in Boston or New York or some of these overpriced areas, hey, try to improve that. Work to improve that. Find a job somewhere where the cost of living is a lot less, and work to find that job. Find yourself that much better housing situation. Keep working on it. You're going to improve that standard of living if you do. Okay, number 10 there on the list. Shop for the best deals. And that requires little work. You got to go out there and comparison shop. Say you're buying a car, or you're buying a house, or you're buying just everyday stuff. Always look for the best deals. You can take a $50,000 income and live like you make $100,000 just by getting great deals on the things you purchase. Okay, just for an example, I can't understand this. I drive around gas stations in my town. The lowest price I see is about $3.09 a gallon right now. And I drive across town, and there's stations that sell it for $3.79 a gallon. And I'm thinking, well, who's paying $3.79 when there's a bunch of stations selling it for $3.09? That's one of the things I'm talking about. They're wasting their money paying, 70 cents a gallon more. So you fill up your car, you get 12 gallons. They're paying $10 more right there. And those little things do add up, too. So just make a habit of knowing where that good price is. It's easy with the internet now. They got, cheap gas. And you don't want to buy gas at the cheapest station and you don't know what the brand of the gas is. You can still get, if you look around, you can still get good branded gas for a really good price. It just takes a little effort, and it's worth it because it makes a better standard of living. And do that with everything you buy. Okay, that's my top 10, and I'm gonna be doing a podcast on each of those top 10 things for a great standard of living here in the next few weeks or months. Get into a little more detail on each of those. Now, I do have a few more things for a great standard of living. I got 11 through 16, and I'm going to do my next podcast on that 11 through 16 and put that out there too. I just had too many to just have a top 10. So I'm going to do a second top 10 things for a great standard of living. Will be number 11 through 16. And I might come up with some more, and if I do, I will put those out there too. Thank you for listening in today. And until next time, this is Lloyd Holiday signing off.